let's start with Ukraine and the morass that the United States is in Ukraine. What do the folks, what do the elites, what does the government think about the behavior of the United States in Ukraine?
Well, I'd prefer to, if I may, come back to that by saying a few things about the huge changes that are taking place in China. Until now, the United States and the West has considered that it had huge leverage over China. And what is happening in this period has been that actually China now has the leverage over the West. And that consists of a number of things that China understood from what they've seen with Russia, that they had to not simply become dependent on the West for the import of goods. They had to do the opposite. They had to be self-sufficient. They had to build out industrially. They had to change the whole economy to being a manufacturing industrial economy. This is the opposite of what happened in most of Southeast Asia. In other words, the economy, the market, unlike the West, where the market rules the state, there the state rules the market in the national interest. And so they have built a huge industrial complex. The second thing that they've done is they're managing AI in a completely different way from that of America. The AI here is not about, if you like, a militarized AI as it is in the US with Palantir and so on. It is here something that is simpler and is diffused throughout the economy, the manufacturing economy, in a way which is not really AI, but it is AI, but it's basically bringing automation, bringing technology, bringing robots into industry. And it's had a huge impact here. Of course, there are some difficulties with it because there are jobs losses in China too. And you see there's a certain, slowdown on the streets. There's a certain cooling of the economy, although people are being able to move to other economies. But one big manufacturer here in China, domestic manufacturer, told me typically, he says, in his companies, in his business, which used to a year ago employ 2,000 people, it's down to 200 now. And the costs of production are much reduced. In fact, what is happening is that China is in price deflation at the same time that America and Europe is in price inflation. And that poses a huge strategic problem, I believe, for us, because with these changes, industrial changes, there is almost nothing that China needs from the West, apart from aircraft, from chips and a few advanced tools and technical items. But by and large, it doesn't. It's become self-sufficient, slightly like Russia did earlier. And becoming self-sufficient in this way means that they are not subject to pressures. They have, as I say, AI that has changed. They are so competitive that effectively it's impossible now, I would say, for the West, with its inflation and China's deflation, if you like, to sell their products into China in the future. Effectively, China is out of the equation. They don't need to buy, and it's not competitive. We are no longer competitive against China at these levels where it has completely changed. And they've changed it in another way, which is just as important, which the West can't match either. Everything here is done through, if you like, this financial ecosystem, a huge ecosystem of finance, which is worked with WeChat or Alipay. And you have a billion Chinese conducting business, buying and selling on WeChat, 1 million, and on Alipay too. And all of this is now absorbing, if you like, the diffusion of AI through to this element.
This is
It's a huge change that has taken place in this period.
this is a remarkable explanation that you've just given us, and it brings to mind a couple of observations on my part, and I would welcome your critique of them. But I don't think the President of the United States understands what you just articulated, and I don't think the tariffs he attempted to impose to control China had any of the effects that he wished.
No, it had none of the effects, if you like, in that way on China. And the rare earths was just an example that China actually had the leverage completely, as they do in many areas, almost all of these areas. And as I say, the key thing is that how would he do this when actually the Chinese price level is deflating and the competitiveness of industry is going through a really tectonic change here. As I say, there's almost nothing that would be competitive in China at the moment. And I've been talking to, people, a person here who has many manufacturing firms throughout the country as well as in Africa, and he can see this change. And the AI has been used completely differently. Whereas in America, AI is sort of geared to military structures and needs and to control and targeting and identifying targets. I mean, here it is something that has been diffused throughout industry at a lower level of AI. I mean, it's basically automation and robots and robotics, but it is widespread across the whole industry. So they never did what we did, either have financialized the economy. It is strictly an economy that manufactures and produces things, and it doesn't have that financialized world which has led to this bifurcation of our economies. We have the economy which is soaring in the stock market, which is tied to the finance world, and the other economy of ordinary people, which is going dropping and dropping and dropping. I saw the statistics for Black Friday that actually output, actual goods sold was 1% down, prices were 7% up. I mean, this is a crisis, a structural crisis the West had. And here in China, it's viewed that the West has completely gone the wrong direction on AI, moving to this AI, which they hope will lead to AGI, the artificial general intelligence, i.e. human intelligence, which may be a long time off.
Are you able to put your finger on the pulse of any collective thinking in China about President Trump?
Well, I think the thinking is what I'm trying to get to here is the management of this situation is going to be very delicate. That's why I referred to Thucydides at the beginning. It is a question of how to deal with this. Now, it'll be very difficult for the United States to accept the change that has taken place in China in this period. This, if you like, avoidance of the dollar trap, the establishment of their own financial ecosystem, and these open source AI systems, which they are bringing into play in industry and also in the financial sphere. Because as I say, the AI is being deployed in things like WeChat or Alipay. So you can do anything and buy anything through these technical apps. And this is going to spread elsewhere. We are well behind in these sort of systems. The whole of the consumer body of 1.4 billion here is tied in. 1 billion on one of those apps alone, which does all sorts of things. And the West is sort of focused on something different, building these mega, if you like, data stores. And that is the other thing that China has the great advantage, and they point this out to me, is that in China, I mean, they have the energy. They don't have the problem of energy for these big, if you like, mega data centers. They have electricity, and they have that from various sources, and they are actually diminishing their requirements for oil. At the moment, they do take a large amount of oil, but 50% of that oil is used for transport, transporting goods, transport generally, transport in the economy. Now, what they suggest is that is going through innovation very fast. Already, all of the motorcycles, all of the cars here are electric. They think their needs for oil are going to be much reduced. They're going to be less dependent on oil as a source of energy. And they have other things coming on play. They have also new ideas about energy. They are going for fusion. They hope that will nuclear fusion. They hope that they have a project that is up and running on nuclear fusion, and they have also other systems, a non-nuclear system for generating electricity. It's too complicated for me to grasp, but it's a thorium system. And these things, they believe, are going to change the energy balance too, but in China's favor. Now, and again, I'm saying I think this is going to be very hard because the consequences for Europe, for America, I mean, are going to be particularly dire because we are putting so much money into our style of AI. And I think the Chinese don't believe that it will be sustained. Huge, I mean, trillions are going into AI in a bid to achieve AI dominance. And the Chinese are doing open source, spreading theirs almost no cost. It is being spread, it's being used widely. People are turning to the Chinese model of AI, and they think that that the AI in the United States is a big bubble and will never produce the revenues. They will produce revenues because theirs is linked into this financial ecosphere, and that they can bring the revenues of the financial sphere into AI so that the AI will be self-sufficient, will be sustainable because it is producing cash flows and is producing a revenue for the future. So they're very confident. There are problems, as I say, they're affected by AI, but prices are going down. They tell me, the industrialists tell me, the people are getting jobs. It's not perfect, but it is working. The killer really is the fact that there's price deflation here and price inflation in the West. How are we going to be competitive? How can we have leverage in that condition? I think it seems to me to be a really striking sort of event, striking condition that exists here. The reaction, of course, probably in the United States, well, we will have to do more to try and contain China and to stop it and to deal with it so that they don't become dominant. What I'm saying is they've become dominant.
Let's, before we go, just transfer over to the political world. Is there any such thing as a collective opinion of President Trump or of the morass that the United States is in Gaza or Ukraine?
I think the first thing I would, and I know you want to go over to that, I think they feel that the United States is in financial difficulties. That's the first thing. And they're probably right about their view of that. I think the second thing is that they believe that in terms of Ukraine, that there will be a deal, and that Trump will accept a deal which may be a deal that has come about by military successes of Russia rather than anything else. So they do see what's happening in Ukraine. I don't think that they believe that the approach to Ukraine, if you like, the talking points, is likely to succeed, is likely to bring about an arrangement. And they follow that very carefully. And I would say that the most important thing is they have the sense that the United States still hankers after the idea of separating Russia and China, because it sort of, there's a hangover from the Vietnam days that believes that China and Russia are culturally incompatible. And they just dismiss completely that idea. They just say, clearly that is not to understand China and Russia in today's world. So I would say that is one thing. On the Middle East, I think they are very concerned, and they're very concerned generally. I've been talking about this, that we are sitting on a number of volcanoes in the Middle East, but Ukraine has been one. What will be the United States' reaction? And it comes back to the same thing. I mean, if the United States feels that it is losing its primacy, if the United States and Mr. Trump feels that he's not getting successes in the Middle East or in Ukraine, and that the story isn't one of winning and winning, he may become unpredictable. And how to manage that, how to manage, if you like, I won't say unstable, but less than stable Europe. I mean, because they're very much aware and were asking me about, why all this talk in Europe about going to war with Russia? Are they serious about this? And what does this mean? And I think that they are also thinking very carefully about what Europe might do, what will happen in the Middle East. But for their point of view, that the Russia-China thing is very secure. And I would add that it's clear they have all the technical ability to roll out a new financial system across Central Asia, across the BRIC states. I mean, the technology is already working here. It's already in place here. They're using it all the time in the domestic sense. It could be rolled out. I think they're being very careful not to see it roll out and not to let it roll out. But an indication is, for example, in the Chinese, who used to be a major purchaser of US long-dated treasuries, 30-year treasuries, is now represent only 7% of US treasuries. And so there's been a big decline in the purchase of US treasuries, not only by China. The only increases come from other parts, but they understand that this is going to cause the debt issue, the debt market is a really serious concern. They don't believe in these measures of using stable coins and other things to try and increase the purchase of either US bonds or US bills, the short-term credit. They don't see this as really working. So they believe there's going to be a real problem on that. And I think this is why they are playing it very quietly, this rollout of the alternative financial system. They don't want to be seen or it to be held that they have somehow provoked the problem in the debt markets in the United States. They would prefer, if there is such a thing, that they are not sort of directly involved with it.
果然，一聊中国就容易跑题。主持人问受访嘉宾阿拉斯泰尔·克鲁克：“中国人对美国在乌克兰的行为 以及对美国总统特朗普的看法时，克鲁克尝试先做一些背景铺垫，介绍中国目前正在发生的巨大变化，结果话一说开就刹不住了。克鲁克是一位资深的英国外交官和经济评论员，曾在英国军情六处和欧盟外交部门担任要职。克鲁克长期观察中国发展模式，形成了不同于西方主流叙事的独特见解。他谈到中国非常重视人工智能在制造业的落地，虽然因为机器代替人工导致出现了一些失业的现象，但同时也让生产成本大幅降低，使中国处在物价通缩状态，而与此同时，欧美则处在物价通胀状态。两相对比，使欧美的产品更没有竞争力。中国本来就有庞大的工业体系，基本已经实现自给自足，而现在中国基本上没有什么是缺乏竞争力的，这让中国的优势会更加明显，更不受制于外部压力。这是近期我第二次看到有人正面评价中国经济的通缩。之前是法国经济学家路易加夫谈到中国的通缩问题，他甚至提出了一个全新的概念，通缩繁荣。他说，虽然中国面临着房地产市场崩盘和产能过剩的双重通缩压力，但高科技的迅猛发展让中国正在逐步走向通缩繁荣，物价和资产价格双双下降，对境外产业产生资本虹吸效应。他说，通缩本来就是资本主义的自然状态，每个企业家、每个商业领袖天天都在思考如何用更少的土地、更少的工人、更少的资源生产更多的产品，这就是资本主义的全部意义所在。例如19世纪的工业革命时期，得益于铁路、蒸汽机等带来的生产效率飙升，英美在大部分时间里经历了物价温和下降，但同时经济高速增长。中国现在的情况正类似于此。其实在主流宏观经济学中，通货紧缩普遍被视为一种病态或危险的信号，因为物价下降导致企业和个人的实际债务负担加重，迫使其削减支出、抛售资产，进一步压低价格，形成恶性循环。消费者预期未来价格会更低，从而推迟消费和投资，导致总需求萎缩。最常被举的例子就是日本失去的30年。所以避免通缩已成为全球主要央行的核心政策目标之一。在这种语境下，通缩与繁荣是相互矛盾的。但克鲁克和路易加夫着眼的是中国的供给侧通缩，即由于人工智能的大范围应用而产生的生产率爆炸性增长、高科技革命和充分竞争，导致商品和服务的生产成本和价格系统性下降，但需求并没有明显减弱。这有别于需求侧通缩，即由于总需求崩溃，比如金融危机、消费信心崩塌导致的通缩，从而引发萧条。物价下降意味着居民的实际收入和购买力上升，能消费更多更好的商品，从而提高生活水平。而同时，效率低下的企业被淘汰，资源和资本流向高效率创新型部门，推动经济结构升级，这样就出现所谓通缩繁荣。比如中国新能源汽车产业，通过激烈的技术竞争和规模效应，电池成本10年间下降了将近 90%， 整车价格大幅下降，性能却急速提升，摧毁被西方主导多年的燃油车市场之余，还创造了一个世界领先的新产业集群，以及大量的高薪岗位和巨大的出口顺差。对于消费者而言，用更少的钱获得了更好的产品，这就是繁荣的体验。当然，以上都是专家的一家之言，中国是否有所谓通缩繁荣，有待更长期的观察和定义。因为虽然中国有科技发展带来的物价通缩，但房地产价格下跌和地方政府债务压力同样是中国非常突出的问题，这属于典型的需求侧资产端通缩，会导致家庭和企业财富缩水、信贷收缩、消费和投资意愿低迷。这与供给侧繁荣的力量是相互对抗的。另外，人工智能和产业升级导致的大规模结构性失业所带来的影响绝对不能低估，这种转型阵痛可能会非常剧烈。所以，如何引导经济走向一条在物价稳定中实现质量提升的独特发展路径，这条路是否能走通，将会是中国21世纪 最重要的宏观经济实验之一。